Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Ghosts and Goblins event in which the Gloomhob is added to the game. So we got a bunch of teams to go over, a brand new season, we're now in campaign 19, as well as a Vault event this weekend. So let's start and get into things. One thing to note right off the bat, because I'm pretty sure I will forget to mention it if I don't mention it right now, is the Biska. That one mythic from last Friday, that's pretty average, not good, not bad, nice little middle ground, gonna use it mostly in like our scale restrictions and such. He is still in drop table for Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests for the next 4 days, all the way till Friday at reset time, basically the end of Thursday. So still a chance to go and get him, so if you are going to be opening any keys, keep in mind within that time it will just be him, unless you're opening event keys, in which case it will be all the goblins. But anyways, let's go over the new troop, as he does actually have the new mechanic on him. So, great time to stock up on green purple arcanes if you need them, only 200 glory each. As far as the troop itself, it deals some damage to an enemy, boosted by ghost gems and undead enemies. This amount of damage is pretty minuscule, and just gains on all the extra turn, as you would kind of expect from goblins. However, it does have the ghost mechanic on it. So there is a 50% chance to create a ghost gem when my turn begins. So, of course, we do actually have this ever since the previous patch, the ability to see all the upcoming power gems ahead of time. So we can actually see this without even needing it here. If we go over to this new little thing all the way in the top left of a battle, we can end up seeing the heroic gem guide, and it shows you every single heroic gem in the game. And we've actually been able to see since the patch that, yeah, I'd be getting ghost gems. As far as what a ghost gem does, it's very similar to a booty gem, except it is 10 souls instead of 10 gold. So every single time you end up destroying this, you'll end up getting 10 souls. It cannot be matched or count as any color. The main noteworthy thing about this that should make it a little bit better than booty gems is not even necessarily that you're gaining soul currency, because of course having more souls is better than not more souls, but it is the cap that you have for a given battle. Normally your soul cap is 40 and your gold cap is 100. So you have to take 2.5 times as many booty gems in order to equal the same amount of soul gems. And if we end up having necromancy or other similar effects, we will of course end up getting more additional benefit for every single one of our soul gems. So if we can just get a little bit of an explode on that, I just realized I don't have a good destroy on this team. I was just doing this best way with the thing real quick. However, I don't actually have explode for that little guy. I don't have explode for you too. Okay, now I do. So, of course, whenever we end up taking one of these, we'll end up getting 10 souls. However, it is boosted by all your multipliers, of course, so we currently have 3 necromancies on this team, which means we will end up getting 150% extra souls from this little guy. So as you can see right over there, we went straight from the 5 that we're at all the way to 25, as we got our standard 10 increased by the extra 150% for an extra 15 for a total of 25. But yeah, one nice thing that's about soul gems is it does scale based on all that, so as long as you take 4 soul gems, you will reach the max cap of souls. So in various soul boost ratio teams and the such, this soul gem mechanic might come into play. Also, you might notice I keep calling it soul gem. It is called a ghost gem. I will be referring to it almost always as a soul gem. However, it is actually called a ghost gem, but it's definitely just a soul gem. But anyways, it might come into play with like Farish Ra because he has 50% mana start. I mean, not 50% mana start, but 150% extra bonus for souls, and some other things like that. There's also, what's his name, which has a really good AoE, Judge the Dead, so there might be some synergies with this going forward, and who knows, maybe we'll get an actual booty gem mechanic that is actually decent. As far as the campaign, we're not really getting anything too special as far as rewards, pretty much the standard stuff. Definitely not the worst stuff this time around, but could be a little bit better. As far as our weapon, we get a mix of ghost gems and freeze gems, which are of course blue, and ends up getting explode, so you might be able to get some value out of those immediately. Aside from that, tarot cards obviously pretty useless as per usual, but the mythic itself ends up dealing a bunch of lifesteal to the first 2 enemies while having 65% score reduction. It reminds me a lot of that one yellow-blue thing from Frostfire Keep, I believe it's called. That ends up having 65% reduction, has lifesteal to 1 enemy. This is basically a mythic version of that troop centered around ghost gems. It steals a bunch of life from the first 2 enemies instead of just 1, and it's boosted by ghost gems at a pretty sizable boost ratio. Keep in mind this is ghost gems and not a soul boost ratio. So even though he could be used on a soul boost ratio team, his actual boost ratio itself is based on ghost gems on the board, and then ends up cursing and freezing them if they happen to survive, which of course not too bad. That will guarantee that they can end up being freezed, assuming the curse takes place beforehand, which it should, based on the naming order. And on top of that, he also gets to create 1 ghost gem every single turn. And if you have like double up on this, within 2 turns, you could easily just do 1 single explode, max out your souls and gain max potential if you have something with soul boost ratio on your team. So interesting to see how stuff like this pans out. Definitely compared to how bad we've been getting on mythics for season passes, this one's definitely not as bad though. Very niche. It's obviously just gonna be using true damage stuff compared to something like Tesla for only 15 mana. It's obviously so little damage, but it's more in the category of something like Draculus than it is Tesla, in the sense that it's not meant to be a super high damage lifesteal option. It's more so meant to be a really, really tanky lifesteal option, having 65% score reduction combined with a pretty hefty amount of life gain, as any true damage that it does with that, it does get to gain itself. So interesting to see overall how that ends up ultimately panning out. But anyways, let's start getting into the other things. First things first, as we mentioned in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest drop table, if I could hover over the right ones, this one, and this one. These are all still the Biska, the new mythic from last Friday. If you don't want Biska, wait until at least Friday or later to open your keys again, as those 4 keys are currently only give Biskas as your mythic for the next 4 days. As far as event keys though, it is associated to Zejin, which is actually really good. Zejin, of course, is pretty much the entire Goblin location, and every single thing within this drop table is pretty much usable to some degree, some a little bit more so than others. As far as the things that are not in drop table, these include the, these include the 4 to 5 faction troops. I think it's 5 these days. The tarot card of the Fool, and that is it. So just those 5 or 6 things are not in drop table. As far as everything that is in drop table, well, everything else, as far as what's useful from that, Hiking Iron Gut. All 3 of these mythics, honestly, not bad. Fairy Godmother, very volatile but super good mana accumulator that can fill an entire mana pool, so really good on high mana pools, and does not care if they're fully mana blocked, as whenever you take a Wish Gem, destroy it, you end up getting 1, 2, 3, or 4 of your allies to full mana, as well as a 5th option that will give all your allies full mana and all enemies full mana. So it's really good at giving you a ton of mana, but can be very volatile, plus if the enemy ends up getting them, they're also getting that full mana, so very great for mana accumulation, though very, very volatile. Flaming Ani, also mana accumulator, but a lot safer, has triple resummon, guaranteed, which is super good. All goblins, which are a really strong category, among one of the strongest in the game as far as just randomly summoning something. And it does a decent amount of mana accumulation while also pretty much perpetually burning. And of course, Hiking Iron Gut's by far the most noteworthy one here. It's something you generally want to pick up pretty early on in the game. It's one of the main things you probably want to run for Underworld. It's really good at killing out higher level content. And regardless of what your attack value is, as soon as you get one attack in most harder content like Explorer 12 or Underworld or anything similar, you will be at the point where you'll be at 100 plus attack, which will allow him to devour every single thing per cast. And if you put something with Curse onto your team, he will be able to devour absolutely everything, even if they have Impervious or other means of immune to devour. So really, really great 3 mythics. You really can't go wrong. And if you're currently missing all 3 of these, I would definitely advise opening some amount of event keys today, and hope they end up getting lucky with one, if not multiple. Though Hiking Iron Gut, I would say, is by far the best of the 3, though you can't really go wrong with any of them, unlike many other event weeks where it's a pretty big mix. Aside from that, I wouldn't say there's too many over-the-top things underneath Goblins. A lot of them kind of have good synergy, like this thing having Impervious with Goblin teams, this thing being one of the only few things in the entire game that has Greenstorm other than Hero. There's a few good utility troops here and there, but for the most part, you're building out of all the higher rarity stuff. You're generally building a team out of one of these 3 and then kind of going from there. And while not in the event key drop table, Truffle also kind of invalidates a lot of Goblins, just because he's absurdly good value with infinite loop into himself, particularly if you have 2 of him into Greenstorm into a Forest Troll, which we actually show for one of the teams for, I believe, Underworld. But he's just really, really consistent at looping, and can get to the point where he has an actual infinite, as in he will never stop extra turning when you have Greenstorm, Forest Troll, and double of him. So very, very powerful thing. The reason you don't see him as often is his amount of damage that he does per cast is not the greatest. So compared to like Stellarix and similar things, even though he theoretically has infinite damage, even compared to something like Beatrix where he's way more consistent, the damage that he does apply is a lot slower. So with how much time it takes to get him rolling, especially with the fact that you have to deal with freeze and stuff like that, he's generally not used as often, but he's really consistent at not losing. He just might be a little bit slower compared to other options. Anyways, but yeah, definitely advise getting him. He's not in event keys, but he is from the Amethyrex faction, which of course you can throw Chaos Shards for at any points underneath Underworld, over in Amethyrex, underneath the portals, and he's going to be really good for a lot of events this game week, so definitely worth considering. Anyways, as far as the world event is concerned, we have a Goblin restriction, which is basically a Zejin restriction. Obviously, there are a few goblins that aren't Zacian, but like 95% of them are, so this is basically a Zacian restriction. Whatever team you're running for this, you're actually basically just running for Underworld. There isn't really any need to switch anything out otherwise, as all the better goblins are in Zacian anyways. There's a lot of infinite loop teams that you can end up building, with as cheap as just like spamming Truffle into Turnip and similar things. And of course, on the higher end, you have things like Hiking Iron Gut that you can build around. But overall, should be very, very free week. Especially if these teams don't really have much freeze, if any at all, as that's the main thing that goblins normally have to deal with. That can be a little bit of a liability, however, it is a goblin restriction, so one thing to note is you do have access to Wand, oddly enough. You can end up using Wand here. You can't end up doing that for Underspire this week, as it also has the Zacian weapon restriction attached to it. But if you really want to, you can literally just go Wand, you have all the cleanse, you have all the curse, and just covers everything you need there. So it is an option worth potentially considering. Anyways, aside from that, as far as other things that we have going on this week, this Tuesday, we have ourselves the faction event for Amethyrex. Of course, we were just mentioning this. Well, you can go for it at any point. That is where Truffle resides. It's also a really easy pure faction. You spam 4 Truffles because he's so good. Wednesday, we're getting the bonus for Zacian. Thursday, pretty decent hero class. I forget if it has 20% stats this week. Let me go double check. I sure hope it does. It's actually a really fun hero class. I don't use it as often, but you definitely want to use it if you're using a Goblin team. It's 10% to Goblins and 10% to Zacian. So yes, Thief hero class does have 20% extra bonus this week. So definitely worth considering if you don't already use it some. As 20% extra stats can make quite a bit of a damage difference. But yeah, we have that going on Thursday. Its most noteworthy aspect is there's a lot of resummon, and it works really good in 4x Goblin teams. And obviously on a week like this, that is pretty useful, as you're going to be using a 4x Goblin team in things like Underspire and things like the Ward event this week. So you can definitely get a decent amount of usage. And of course, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in this video, we do have a Vault event this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Best time ever to be grinding in the game. Actually, that reminds me, I need to go finish out all the rest of these keys. I still have 257 for the previous one. Oh, wow, we need to go open all of these this week. I didn't realize I had so many spare Vault keys right now. I need to start churning through like 50 a day or so. Actually, more than that. It's Monday right now. You need to start churning through, what was that, 70 something? Numbers around there, 60 something. But I like having 0 lately just to start up each Vault event. But yeah, Vault event this weekend. So definitely a great time to be farming for a ton of Vault key loot. Anyways, next. We have ourselves soulforge. As far as troops, pretty skippable. Nothing really worth mentioning here as far as mythics that are available or anything else like that. Unless you want to get something, of course. But for the most part, nothing really here that you're going to end up needing. However, under the weapon category, that is not the case. Norbert's Turnip. Do not leave this week without it. It is the Goblin Infinite Loop weapon. While there are things like Wand and other similar things that you can run with Goblin teams these days, this is the main boost ratio one that you really want to go if you want to maintain the extra turn spam. It's pretty standard. It just deals some damage to an enemy, boosted by Goblins, and then creates a bunch of green and red while using brown-yellow as its coloration. However, the main thing that's really strong on this is actually underneath its perks. As you can see right here, it gains an extra turn similar to all Goblins. So the fact that it has auto extra turn means you cast this, and even if it doesn't land its own extra turn, you will still be on your turn. So you end up getting a lot of mana value from this. You guarantee will not skip your turn as long as you're not frozen on your hero. And yeah, you just get a ton of value. Overall, one of the better double weapons, especially of the ones that don't feed back into themselves. It is really good to do that extra turn potential that it has. And the fact that you're going to be using it with Goblins. Pretty much all Goblins have guaranteed extra turn as well. So you're using an extra turn weapon on a team that's already all extra turn options, while feeding them pretty vital mana, particularly green. Red's not as needed for Goblins, but green definitely is. Almost every single Goblin that's relevant, except for maybe like Iron Gut or something, ends up utilizing that green mana there. But anyways, yeah, definitely do not leave this week without Norbert's Turnip. Everything else is pretty optional based on if you want it or not. But if you don't have Norbert's Turnip, definitely get it this week. Anyways, aside from that, let's see, one over that. We've got the brand new campaign. Yeah, let's go now into the good old team. So, we don't have as many teams to go show, oddly enough. Oh, why did I go over here? I guess it's a habit from earlier. That doesn't bring me to the menu anymore. Yeah, we don't have as many teams as this World Event team is technically World Event / Underworld team. I think the only difference is, obviously you can't run Wand, but you can just end up replacing that out. That's not really that big a deal. Whereas this is honestly probably just like the team to run. This has been the Goblin meta for quite a while now, and surprisingly, it has not changed. I think since 2018, 2019, this has held for like 5-6 years or so. And it's really good. Thief not only has 20% extra stats this week, but you have Impervious in first slot, something really rare on Goblins. and is really good because it's immune to freeze. It also works pretty good in first slot because it also is immune to, entangle and everything else. Norbert's Turnip, we were just going over this earlier, but it has auto extra turn and feeds a lot of very useful mana, mostly green and red, with green being the very relevant one. King Gob Truffle, there's a really loopy overall troop and really good at sustaining your turn. And then we have Strength Fiddler, which is used for both its green storm that it has, and if you just keep silencing the enemy while also doing all those explodes, not only is it doing a bunch of mana accumulation, but if you do inevitably eventually end your turn at some point after like 20, 30, 50 turns in a row, the entire enemy team will be silenced, assuming they can be silenced. So even if they get a turn, there's no mana they could do. So most will just poke you with a skull or something. So overall, really, really solid. And this is pretty much the team to be using. You can be using like some insta-kill stuff like that. Keep in mind you can't use Wand of Stars for Underspire, but you can for for the World Event. But otherwise, you're basically just building either into an insta-kill team for the higher range, or for most of the range, or even the whole time if you want, you're building into Infinite Loop Goblin. And one great thing about this team, not a single mythic, and technically no legends. While it does use Truffle, which is theoretically a legend, and I guess the weapon itself. The weapon is pretty easy to get in Soulforge this week, and King Gob Truffle can always be targeted from a faction. So even though it is technically a legend, it's a faction legend, which makes it very, very common to end up getting. So the only thing you really have to do is get the other two epics. And even if you don't have these, there are plenty of random goblins you can just slot in as alternatives. It's mostly Norbert's Turnip into King Gob Truffle. If you really, really want to, you could even go triple Truffle into Turnip, and you'd probably be fine, though you wouldn't be able to use the red in that situation. But it'd still end up being pretty good value. Anyways, speaking of spamming billion of the guy, we'll get to him in a second. We have brown, green restriction for this, so we can run pretty standard guards avatar ability. Got buffed a couple weeks ago, still insanely good. For the higher range, I figured we might as well show this at least once. The Forest Troll, Gob Truffle, Infinite Loop. You have Green Storm off of Hero, off of Archer, though of course you can use any Green Storm Hero class you wish. I just happen to be doing with Archer because of 50% mana start and everything. But we're doing that with Archer. Get our Green Storm. Forest Troll doubles the amount of green +3 onto the board, and then you just keep going into Truffle. So ideally what you do is cast your Forest Troll, cast your double Truffle, you then have Infinite Loop, you use one to either cleanse if you need to get rid of Freeze, Curse to get rid of Submerge, and then you simply just win. And that's all you have to do. As far as pure faction, you have a nice diverse team of 4 King Gob Truffle. There just isn't really much of a need to run anything else. He's just so good on his own that you don't really need anything else. This also makes it easier to get his full boost ratio, as he diseases a random enemy every single time he ends up matching for an extra turn, which he needs for his boost ratio on his ability, as he does boost based on poisoned and diseased enemies. Aside from that, we do have ourselves the Thief class. A couple different ways we could do this. We have access to either Red Link or Green Link, so I end up going down the Goblin Rocket route. Goblin Rocket's surprisingly good. Main reason it's not used is it's very, very slow. It's one of the reasons why Truffle isn't used as much, even though Truffle is insanely good at maintaining your turn. So as Goblin Rocket, it's definitely not the quickest means of winning. However, we're mostly just using him for his 3 Fire Link, and if he happens to get mana, he gets mana. Basically, it's a rushdown weapon as you would normally do on an event like this, just feeding into any red and or green weapon you have, and then just quick killing them by casting your weapon a few times, or even once at the lower range. And that's all you have to do. And of course, this weekend we have ourselves all the Vault event stuff, where we'll just be using quick kill teams on Explore, getting all of the Vault keys we possibly can, and go from there. But anyways, guys, if you still have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Tonight we'll be going and messing around with everything with the campaign, though for the most part, not too much we'll need to mess around with yet. Obviously, there isn't too much we could do with the Ghost Gem mechanic, but I am really curious later in the season to see what the Soul meta will be after this next 10 weeks. Because by the end of this, we might actually have a new Soul meta that isn't like Ferris Raw into that one AoE troop. I probably would still use that as the base. But that team is still missing like one really good offset troop that both mana accumulates and gains souls quickly. Both of those things very quickly, to kind of put the whole team together. And I'm hoping that during this season, we might end up getting that out of the new Ghost Gem mechanic. So I'll just kind of have to wait and see if anything during the season ends up getting that, as Soul meta might actually make a comeback. And even if you don't need souls, because obviously we don't need souls, there's still a lot of good boost ratios off of souls. Similar like the gold boost ratio teams, where you don't necessarily do it for gold, though still having more gold is nice. Sometimes you just did it in the past because they were really high damage. And same with soul teams, even if you don't need souls necessarily as a resource, soul boost ratio teams, if they do make a comeback, could actually just be standardized as a pretty decent like alternative Stellarix and stuff like that, as some of them reach some pretty high amount of damage. Obviously not to the degree like Stellarix to quite that degree, but some of them still hit pretty hard, so interesting to see what the state of that is by the end of this season. Anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.